Okay, so this is the awareness campaign. We took the slides from last year and massaged them so we could review a little bit and then come up with some analysis of the survey and then how we're adjusting our timeline. The problem was that food facilities that manufacture, et cetera, covered, these are our problem. And even if they're eligible for an exemption, the smaller operations may lack time and resources to acquire basic understanding of how the rule will affect them and how to proactively prepare for compliance at whatever level they're at. So our project summary was, the goal was to increase awareness. That was our little section here. Of the preventive controls regulation among these smaller size facilities. And so we came up with this term food safety communicators, knowing that we probably wouldn't be very successful in actually reaching food processors. They're busy and they're thinking about other things, and some of them are in Cairo, right, in denial, right? And the scope of the problem, possible solutions, and build a portfolio of PC awareness communication tools. So what can we do to create materials that will increase awareness? Who we can take those back to the food safety communicators who in turn can promulgate them to their end-use processors. So here's again this audience where we have the smaller food processing facilities, primarily under $1 million, very small, right? For smaller, under 500 employees. All right. And we have the communicators. And these are some examples of extension people, consultants, buyers, state, federal regulators, commodity and marketing organizations, food hubs, even grocery store chains, commodities groups, sustainable groups, anybody who might interact at any level with food processors / manufacturers. So our hypothesis, it's always good to have a hypothesis, was that many small or very small manufacturers, processors are not aware of their regulatory status under the preventive controls for human food. And so development and dissemination of these messages will increase their awareness, cause them to seek more in-depth information and training resources from local experts, and incentivize them to take action. So that the awareness, we also have a resources group, right? The awareness would be bombarding the beach with artillery to soften the target before we come in with resources, okay? Because you can't just overwhelm.
You can't just answer on the side.
Was that a charming kind of?
Yeah, if you're the regulated community, yes.
But really, you can overload. It's so easy to overload people. And if they're just clueless, falling back, they're not going to be receptive to resources. And by using the food safety communicator approach, we're empowering the local people, the people who know their people, know their audience, can go in and climb Suribachi and take the flag. Okay. So our plan was a bunch of stages. We're going to identify these communicators and conduct this awareness assessment. Is it really an awareness problem? And what products would be needed to raise awareness? And then develop the materials. That's a big black box right now, but that's going to be our, there's the first one. Where can we
Oh, I thought we covered it.
Oh, okay. She insists on animations. So that was our first one, which we have completed. Applause. And this will be our next one, so you can wait next year to apply for that. And then we also are going to disseminate them ultimately. It doesn't make any sense to develop them. We have to disseminate them. And then always at the end, is it doing something? That's always the hard part. Are we just going to keep the motions, or are people getting these, and are they increasing their awareness? And maybe by that time we'll be able to reach those end users and see how they're doing. This is more in pictorial form about the different stages. The different people are trying to survey, in this case, different kinds of materials to create. and then different, again, the communicators to disseminate it to it. So then I wanted to just go back to the first discussion on the survey results. I think our hypothesis was proven quite dramatically in that 97%, or was it 96? It's depending on the rounding off, right?
Yeah.
96, 97 had no to average awareness of PC requirements. I think that's just amazing. And that says that there really is an awareness problem. And as we get more and more down the line, as these smaller, very small people come into the system and start interacting with regulators, it's going to become an issue. So we're going to head it off at the pass. Respondents also believe that most small or very small food processors, 92%, had no to average awareness of risk-based PCHF requirements for writing the food safety plan. I guess that's a resources issue, but we'll throw that at the resource people. But here, 77% of responders, the communicators, felt that the lack of awareness and understanding of the regulation was very or extremely challenging. So I guess it's these two here that are just really striking. And by the way, we created this summary here so you could, if you're going to write a grant or something, you can just cut and paste and put those in there. And you got your justification, right? As a specialty crop grants. I'd be curious how people are getting funding for preventive control stuff. There's a lot for produce, right? Not a lot for preventive control. But that's another topic. Next steps is to create this toolkit, this portfolio. And so we're going to have discussions on this and brainstorming. But we're already getting some really great ideas about this attestation. That this is part of the awareness as well. That there is a way, you know, sort of a resource, but it's very early on. But they need to understand that they are regulated, that any processing or manufacturing activity, food is regulated, either by FSBA or by state regulations. It's a complex quilt of regulatory issues. And then we're thinking of expanding our database for outreach to increase access to those communicators and processors. So how we can then reach out even more. Is our current survey enough? Maybe for now. But I don't know what percentage of lead instructors we did get. Did we get it from every state?
Yeah, at least one, right? You got one.
We got at least one response from every state, but I
Yeah.
think
Good, that's
just the
good.
lead inspectors.
That's good. So that's pretty well represented of what's going on in the Northeast. So we did change our time, and this is my animation. So here's our stages again. We originally thought we would get this assessment done in 3 months.
You gotta have a vision, it's gotta be a
I
vision.
should have a vision, man. But, so it took 12 months. So we adjusted that, we did finish that. Okay, thank you. We did finish that, and we adjusted these forward. So now we're gonna be jumping into stage 2 to brainstorm what kind of materials and how we're gonna do that. Simple messages, okay? You know, that would lead them to further resources if they're curious. Lead them to the communicators so that when the resource people come in and storm the beaches, they're ready for them, right?
Just a question.
Just a question. Yeah.
Last week I was in a hardware store and was looking for something, and the young guy just pulled out his cell phone and punched something in, and oh yeah, that'll be this aisle. Simple messaging that people always have, like a cell phone, a lot of times.
Even the Amish have cell phones.
Oh, look at
On
that.
occasion,
Look at
yeah.
that. That's-
Yeah, and this is how we fold into the whole clearinghouse and the whole website and how we bring, everybody has their own flow charts and decision trees and this crazy stuff. Is there one, I hate to say one-stop shopping, but someplace like, you can go to. And then I like the idea of the idea that, okay, if you're in New Hampshire, course, you don't know what's going on in Pennsylvania, but maybe someone called you from Pennsylvania. You could link to that person, and then they would contact them, and a handoff kind of thing.
I just, maybe just a note on the hardware analogy, at least what we've been trying on the dairy side, is that the people who supply the ingredients and like brushes and utensils to cheesemakers, they've been including flyers when they send their shipments out to give them information about our workshops. Maybe that, on the other end, so we don't think of them as food people maybe, but.
It's a vehicle for communication, get a message
That's
out.
clever, Simon.
All sorts of different ways.
And here's another one.
Yeah, and I mentioned this to you in the elevator, I just want to sort of follow up because, Glenn mentioned, 17,000, entities. I hesitate to call them facilities just yet, but entities that exist that haven't, done an attestation and may be subject to this inspection. Amanda, you mentioned that you couldn't go to these entities because you didn't know how to get to them, couldn't find them. I'll just also note that we put a lot of money in the CAP program into states going out and doing the outreach to the farm community, but not so much in the small scale or any processor side. So how do we know what they look like? We've got an FS, we've got that training, which is really geared towards the large entities. Certainly, places that are well aware of their compliance requirements. I'm guessing that what do the bulk of these entities look like? Are they mom and pops operating on a cottage license?
Well, that's where the
What do they
communicators,
look like?
that's where the communicators come in, because it could be a regulator, who, put some material in the trunk of their car as they go around, okay? Give those out. We do that a lot with produce. Or, the shared kitchens, the co-pack, where are the co-packers? It's a little different.
Well, I just want to go back to your Marshall analogies there on the bombardment. You don't take out a single trooper with a mega bomb, right? You have to have the right ordinance. So if we don't have the right tools
Yeah.
to reach these folks, and we don't want to scare them that, look, this is a regulatory nightmare coming down. Here's the appropriate tools for you to comply, because the flexibility is built into the program for these entities. So
Some short, simple messages that would lead them to take, if they want to, okay, it's up to them if they want to take further action. But where should they go to get that further information? Slowly bring them into it. And that requires all these communicators. I give out produce, flip chart trainings to the guy who does pesticide education, because he's always going around to farms and stuff. So we just throw some stuff in his trunk. It's not produce safety, but he gets out there. So just throwing it out there, getting it out there. So here's the people who worked pretty hard on this, in this group: Andrea, Gilbert, Amanda, Luke, David, Jill. And if anyone else wants to help us brainstorm some of this stuff, please contact either Amanda or myself, and the gears will start turning.
Yeah, thanks, Luke. I would just also add, kind of to Roger's comment, it seems, or at least the conversations we've been having in this working group, is first demonstrate that there's a need to raise awareness, and now focus specifically on campaign tools of what that is, and frankly, we don't know exactly what it is, but we know it has to be more than a fact sheet or a fly. It has to be very diverse. But the thing, and I'll just speak from my perspective, the vision that I see is if we could, from a NECAFS perspective, have the same branded messaging, and it doesn't matter if you're from Vermont or Massachusetts, and have the right communicators, and you're a great example, right, of you're an ally to NECAFS, but you serve a different audience, you could in fact have this toolbox too and go on the roadshow. I'm going to this value-added thing, I've got a postcard or whatever. But the idea is having the messaging be ready and accessible in the clearinghouse so that we can try to maximize the outreach. And then I think there's an opportunity to expand that secondary, what do we call them, the food safety communicator, that secondary tier, and then have that audience try to use these tools and disseminate it. And that's years 3 and 4, but the idea now is sort of build a broad base of platforms.
And they could put their contact information, there'd be a spot in there, so you could put who to contact on there.
Yep.
You're always
So-
bringing them back to somebody who sees the larger picture and can get back to that.
So I guess I would add that as a finale of, it started with this working group of Luke and I, and then we pulled Andrea and David and Jill got in board, because particularly Jill Fitzsimmons from UMass does resource economy. And she's a resource economics, you can't. We realized that there's like food safety isn't sexy, so I pulled in a money girl to try to.
Wow, I wish that were more true.
Right. So we're trying, but with those, what's the play that we could try to find partners to enable these pieces, and so we're trying to widen that scope. So the finale I'd ask is that if any, we need more help to kind of expand that reach and have a better strategy to make our campaign consistent that we all can feel good and proud about for better dissemination. So I welcome more of you to join this working group. Bill.
My question is, are you just focusing on the Northeast? Or are you going to be branding it to be used all across
If we're
America
successful.
and all the world?
Yeah. Right now it's Northeast because that's the resources,
True, but you have to look at the
Yeah.
future, like,
I smell a working group team member, right?
Build that awareness, for example, it was Northeast driven, but
Yes.
you can take a look at it and say, is that representative of any other area in the
and
country?
can
So
you then reach out to other people in other areas and.
that might be a good idea with that information even.
Yeah.
This
Not an
is the
assessment
process
survey,
we
so.
use. Maybe you could use a similar process and link into us.
It's like that water database from Michigan that
Right.
now is being expanded. If it works, I mean, we gotta test it out. We might have to get some professional
Yeah,
marketing.
I guess there are two things. I think one thing I maybe heard Roger say that I don't know that has really been teased out, but I think is important is, and this builds on what other people are saying, is just that, part of the question is the body of people who need to receive the message is still a little amorphous. And where are the data that can help us get some clarity around who those entities are? That's one level of it. Because once you start targeting, you're gonna need targeted information to reach them. And if you don't know who they are, you can't target them. I think that's one piece of it. But I think another really important piece, and maybe thinking, again, Roger, from your sort of bigger perspective, is like the funding mechanisms for FDA and USDA to implement preventive controls are really different than
Yeah.
for food safety, produce rules, sorry.
Yeah.
And I think that's an issue that, like, from a body of people that work in this space, I think it's important to say that to people. I think it's important to say that to your legislators. I think it's important to say that at the university or regulatory body that you are engaged with. Because I think, we are struggling to find the resources to document the problem. We're struggling to find the resources to identify who the actual entities are. And that's partly because the funding mechanism is really different than the other part of this rule.
It's politically popular to go for the producer.
And that's fine, but there's a consequence.
But in Pennsylvania, 60% of the agricultural output
Mhm.
is value-added food processors.
Right,
60%.
yes. It's a higher economic value than fresh fruit. Sorry, Roger.
Just one more question, Luke. Aren't most of these entities are already regulated at some level? I mean, I'm sure there are some very small ones that are just sort of ghosting it at a farmer's market out of the back of a truck someplace. But the majority are already covered under cottage or some other license. Why can't that information be shared? I mean, they're due to comply with federal statute. I mean, we're already building databases on the farm side, more or less building databases, trying to build databases.
Let's talk, man.
Actually, we have,
We've been puzzling on this.
I just received a very good database from Pennsylvania Department of Agriculture of all the processor manufacturers, divided up by types of foods they produce, with emails and telephone numbers and addresses and everything. So it's easier to find them than farms, let's say. But what are we gonna get to them? Because they're all different levels. There's a lot of messages to get out, and you have to be careful, but you don't overwhelm somebody with, you have to take this 2.5-day course. Man, you don't.
But that's a real question that I do have, because one of our FDA inspectors told one of our small companies that they do need to become a PCQI. They do have to take the 2.5-day course, and that is a question that all of a sudden, like, boom.
Well, then they need to know
Yeah.
if they have, well, that's the part of the dispute. If you're not satisfied with an answer you get from somebody, where can you get hired?
And that's
Can I
actually
speak
what
to your
I'm
manager
asking.
kind of thing?
Yeah.
So, to that point, like New York, obviously, we have a database, we're already regulating all these facilities, before 117, there was 110.
Mhm.
They're not new to us, we have had like a new, I guess, initiative to document some of their information differently. And we're getting a new database soon, hopefully within the next year or two, which should make it really easy to sort out, okay, these are our retail facilities, these are our manufactured food facilities, these are facilities that are qualified facilities that need to self-attest, et cetera. But as far as disseminating some of the information, our regulators are already in there every year for most of these places. If they're doing any kind of food processing, we're in there once a year, and I imagine a lot of other states are the same. So we've been educating our inspectors on who needs to self-attest, who needs to comply with subpart C and G. And we're getting a lot of questions now from industry, and we don't have enough people to answer them. So if you guys can help us learn what we need to know to answer all of those questions, then we can help you get that information out there.
Awesome.
There has to be a closer relationship between the regulators and the educators.
Right.
They're up, it's getting better. But they can't, the regulator can go in there and tell you what you're doing wrong, but they don't educate the person on how to write the plan, what is the hazard, what are the whole bit to help them go further. And so it's a handoff. But we have to have those materials available, and the regulators would be a community. So we would get those materials out to them, work with them, to, are you happy with this, that kind of thing. And then will you carry this when you go out and hand this to them if they need further?
I mean, the biggest thing that we're having trouble with right now is just, okay, like, do I have to do this? The firms aren't sure, am I a qualified facility or not? We get a lot of people who say, oh, well, I make $750,000 worth of USDA products and $750,000 worth of FDA products, so I'm under $1 million, and no, total human food, sorry.
Right.
Yeah.
So
Well,
just that-
we've developed all these flow charts and interactive things you fill in, hit the button, and it's, but how do you get that out? It's all out there, all that stuff is out there.
It seems like that there's this very small producer is really where the problem exists, primarily because of the FSMA regulation not requiring very small producers to be under this rule. So, from my standpoint, from a buyer standpoint, I just want to ensure that you've got some sort of food safety knowledge under your belt before I start to buy from you.
Well,
So it seems like we're missing one vital piece of an education component for the very small producers.
they are covered under this, They have
But
to,
as soon as they hear that they don't have to comply, they go, okay.
well, parts of it.
Well, but understand that, but they're not listening to the other part.
I know, that's the challenge.
Message is, I do not have to.
Yeah,
Right.
Hear the no.
But his point is, economics will drive them to do it. They have no choice, they're out of the game. The big suppliers like Walmart, they're not gonna take them unless
Yeah.
they comply with
Right.
it. And trust me, we deal with that when we go and inspect.
Sure.
Was that subpart A, everybody must be a qualified individual? Is that, so everybody must have training or be qualified?
So is training safe certification? So what is that minimum? So that minimum, when someone comes to you, and I know what my minimum is, but my minimum isn't what you all are requiring, or maybe there is a higher level of standard.
You have to be-
I'm not,
They have to be trained to know how to produce the safe foods in their facility.
okay,
So I've got a question as well about the very small, because some of my clients have been told that because they're direct selling, they don't count as an FDA facility.
That's-
If 51%.
If they're not reselling.
Well, that's a retail exemption, and we've had
Direct sales.
robust discussions with that.
of my clients are doing internet sales,
Yep.
and that counts as direct sales.
Well, there.
I'm just saying.
Internet sales is a different, box right now. So we're sort of figuring out different sales.
Which box? I need to know.
We're having internal policy discussions with them right now.
Well, technically, retail establishments are covered unless they do
Not retail.
process. I don't know.
When we're going directly to a customer, that's direct sales.
All right, so this is, awareness is just a quick poll. It looks like 84%, well, everybody agree and above, obviously, does think that it's relevant, so that's great.